Since 2012, 47 continuing resolutions have been enacted. They temporarily extend current spending levels until Congress agrees on a budget. Elaine McCusker is former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, comptroller. She's currently a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Elaine, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on this important topic.
So is this the new normal? And I mean, since it happens all the time, isn't the Defense Department expecting it?
I think the Defense Department does expect it, and the Defense Department is incredibly good at planning, and particularly contingency planning. It has a very creative financial management workforce. But that does not mean that we don't have immediate, mid, and long term damage from continuing resolutions, particularly on the national security workforce, all the businesses and communities that support it. And so the Department of Defense is very concerned about continuing resolutions. But honestly, I think all taxpayers should hate them too, because they are waste time and money that should go to our security.
So
And as
let's
you
let's
mentioned,
talk about that, Elaine, the practical implications of the Defense Department operating under a CR. What actually happens?
so they're essentially provided a continuation of last year's funding and priorities until a new appropriation is passed. They can't start anything new. They can't do production increases. They can't do the modernization that is needed to keep our military competitive. And for the Defense Department itself, even though CRs impact all federal departments and agencies, the most critical, in my opinion, is defense, which has spent 1,500 days under CR since 2010. That's more than 4 years in total time of wasted time and money that should be spent on our security. And I often hear people say that so long as the annual appropriation is eventually passed, everything will be okay. That's just not true. You cannot buy back that money and that time that you've lost during when you're basically incrementally funding everything.
And
And I think
sorry, and you said that CRs end up costing taxpayers more in the long run. How does that happen?
a couple of reasons. First, as you're continuing what you did last year and you can't start anything new, and as a matter of fact, the draft of the continuing resolution that Congress is gonna look at actually specifically says that you have to continue what you're doing and only what you're doing in a limited manner until they pass the appropriations bill. And if you do the math on this, which I think is useful for people to kind of understand what we're really talking about, you're talking about $207 million in lost buying power per day under a continuing resolution. And this first one, which we understand is going to go till December 16th, that's 77 days or close to $16 billion in lost buying power during that time frame. That amount of money, just to put it in context, could buy 24 F-15EX aircraft, plus 2 Virginia-class submarines, plus 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, all capabilities that are critical to our national defense and to our competitiveness against what the department itself calls our pacing challenge of China.
And Air Force Chief of Staff General Brown said this. He said, quote, "All the money in the world cannot buy more time. Time is irrecoverable. And when you're working to keep pace against well-resourced and focused competitors, time matters." What do you take from that, Elaine?
I mean, I think he's exactly right, and that's kind of my point. I mean, I think people think that we can kind of just limp along on continuing resolutions because we're used to doing so, but they forget sort of the real time and cumulative effects of doing that. And you're losing your time and your competitiveness. You don't even plan on awarding major contracts in the first half of the fiscal year because you don't know when you're going to get your annual appropriations, and so you're basically losing that time each year over time. And I think, another thing that people probably should understand when you're talking about the real world practical impacts is not only is the money in under a CR not enough, it's also often in the wrong accounts. So, for instance, in FY23, which is the fiscal year that starts on October 1st, there are increases planned for military personnel, operation and maintenance, and research and development, none of which would be available under a continuing resolution. And when you factor in all the challenges that we have, particularly this year on inflation and supply chain, and with the industrial base having the capacity that we need and the workforce that we need, all of these things are sort of compounded under these impacts.
You mentioned inflation because I did want to ask you about that. We're at near historic levels. So how is that affecting the defense budget given the continuing resolution?
Well, it first impacts the workforce. Of course, the workforce is scheduled to get a raise under the annual appropriations, and the department will do everything it can, I'm sure, to get its personnel supported, even though that raise is not enough given where we are with inflation. But on top of that, you have an industrial base that, a lot of times is under firm fixed price contracts that did not and could not have predicted the inflation and supply chain problems that we're having. And the department itself acknowledged this earlier this month when it released a memo reminding its own workforce, the people that buy stuff on the behalf of the department, that they have flexibility to change these rates if need be, because we just couldn't have known. But again, all that costs money, which you don't have under a CR.
And Elaine, in your op-ed, you actually recommend not paying legislators until they can pass a spending bill on time. I'm pretty sure Congress isn't going to pass that either.
No, I think people have suggested this in the past, and it sounds like kind of a crazy idea. But when you look at where we are in history, the fact that Congress has only done its job on time from a funding perspective for 3 years of the last 46, about to be 47 years. And so for whatever reason, the amount of damage that's being done to our national security and to the country and to the economy is not getting through. And so, years ago when people said, we need to put the hurt of the CR where it will do the most good, and we shouldn't pay Congress until they do their primary job, it sounded kind of crazy. But after time, maybe it's not so crazy. I mean, we have to be able to have something on the table that will get the attention of those who can actually fix this problem.
All right, Elaine, appreciate you being on the program. We'll see what happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.